I think, shoot, like Cornell West should print up T-shirts that say Lincoln was a third-party candidate. That seems to me to prove my point that you have a level of social division over the issue of slavery that's so incredible that it does create the social tension. Broad inequity is so extreme that you do get these opportunities to break in. You talk about the Dixiecrats, the Southern segregationists, only realigning the Republican Party somewhat. That's a realignment that they have successfully made their mark on what it means to be a Republican to this date.
Right.
They took it from the Lincoln Republicans to the party we have today.
Yeah.
I
They
would
meant to
love to see
realign
the
the
left.
Democratic Party. They didn't quite do that.
I'm sorry?
I said they meant to realign the Democratic Party. They didn't quite do that.
Right. Well, but the idea that they got their druthers, they created a party realignment that was beholden to their particular racial interests, frankly, that persists to this day, is no small thing. And so obviously my goal is not aiming for a kind of incrementalism. But I do think, a world where the left could have that kind of effect on the Democratic Party is a world where we maybe look like a Scandinavian welfare state versus the hellscape that we have today. And that is not nothing, And so you talk about, the example of Ross Perot's failure. I don't know. I think it would be a pretty great thing if someone like Cornel West could get 15, 16, whatever it was, % of the vote, and make the Democratic Party have to contend with what it's going to do to prevent that from happening next time around. Maybe moving left, I think, would be an amazing thing. If you talk about the Socialist Party of the 1930s, making the mistake of perhaps merging in with the mainstream party and getting but we also got the social safety net that we know and love, and the only thing that's keeping us from being a giant penal colony. You know what I mean? So I'm a little confused by this. And I think that part of the issue is some people look at Green Party runs as unsuccessful unless they win. And one thing I really appreciate about Shama Swan's framing in particular is that she talks about goals other than winning. What can this race accomplish other than winning? And I think you're right when you point to Bernie Sanders' 2016 and 2020 runs and say, we gained things out of that, even though he lost. He changed the political landscape, even though he lost. And if you are saying things like we need to have a mass movement into an independent party, we need to organize, yeah, great. But why not see Cornel West's run as part of that project? How is that not one of the most high-profile ways to advertise that project and recruit people to that project the same way that the Bernie campaigns should have been, not just recruiting people into a kind of a political ideology, but also into a mass movement?
So I think the 30s and 40s is a counterexample to the other examples. Is that's the case of labor organizers, socialists, and communists working within the Democratic Party almost exclusively, and changing the Democratic Party and helping to build a New Deal coalition that lasted for a fair amount of time before they were run out of their very own coalition. So I think all these tactics are fraught. I personally just don't see the Cornel West campaign developing the traction to actually help with mass organizing on the ground. I mean, we are...
But you want him to run as a Democrat, and that would make him more likely to have a positive effect?
Yes, I think so.
Why is that?
I just think that he'll get more attention, have a higher profile, and will be able to drive home the point about the Democratic Party establishment, and also use his platform to talk about issues like union rights, labor conditions, and other bread and butter issues that'll draw us away from some of the divisive cultural war battles that I think are taking over so much of the left's attention right now.
How is he? What specifically do you think about running as a Democrat would enable him to get more attention in this particular Democratic primary, which the Democratic Party has said is not happening?
So I think the Democratic Party is saying that a contested primary or debates aren't happening is a fine thing for us to actually drive home the critique about the Democratic Party through if we had a strong, credible, self-described, socialist candidate. attempting to run in the primaries.
But why can't we make that argument about RFK Jr. and Marianne?
I'm not willing to make the argument about RFK Jr. because I think his programs, in many ways, is almost as bad as Biden
But
on
it's
some
not
key
about
issues.
but it's not about RFK Jr. as a candidate. It's about the critique of the Democratic Party. And at the end of the day, having a very popular candidate that's polling at 20% and you're not allowing primaries, the argument is that the DNC is corrupt, not that RFK Jr. is
Yeah,
necessarily our guy.
I've had made the Williamson argument about her being allowed to debate and that she should be taken seriously as a candidate. Um, Personally, I'm not interested in advocating for any candidate unless they're self-described socialists, unless they're kind of tied to the same project in a national presidential
Is it
election.
advocating for a candidate to say that the Democratic Party is obviously corrupt?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think it is, and I think it's a fairly common sense point for a lot of people, and they're still going to end up voting for the Democratic Party because they think that it's a better alternative to the Republican Party. It's in the yeah, it's a rational choice that a lot of the American working class is making, and if we want to challenge it, we have to put forward a alternative that people think is credible enough to wield power, and I think that starts in opposition.
If I'm understanding you right, you're saying you want Cornel West to run as a Democrat because then you can specifically make the case about how unfair it is about how the Democratic Party is shutting down the primaries. But I don't understand why that, if the argument is on one side, you want a candidate out there saying the Democratic Socialist things and messaging well, great. You have Marianne who's already doing it as a Democrat, and you're having Cornel West who's doing it as a third party, and they both have the possibility to do it. The question is, why move Cornel West into the Democratic Party? And that is not about the substantive arguments that he's making, because there is no platform, right? There's no debates, there's no platform. Then it's an argument about, well, if he's in the Democratic Party, he can expose how corrupt the Democratic Party is because he's a great guy, everybody loves him, and they're not letting him do a debate. But that is an argument that you can make regardless of the person involved. The Democratic Party, because frankly, he's not, I mean, look, maybe I could be wrong. I don't really see him polling as well as a Democrat or not as RFK Jr. And so the argument is you've got 30% of the vote, 9 from Marianne and 20-ish from RFK Jr. that is already going to candidates that aren't Joe Biden and that the Democratic Party doesn't want to debate. The argument is that 77% of Democrats, or whatever the number is, don't want Joe Biden to run again, and yet they still won't have a debate. And I'm struggling to understand, given all the benefits that I see and Cornel West are running separately, why do you need him to make that argument? Why do you need him as a Democrat to make that argument?
Well, I think he is potentially a very strong candidate. I think he's a candidate who is already coming into this. He was better known than RFK Jr. was. I think that's pretty safe to say. He's obviously now not as well known as RFK Jr. He'd be, I think, better able to get his message out, use the media circuit, discuss his role as someone who's involved in the 2 Bernie Sanders campaigns and who wants to continue the message of Bernie Sanders, discuss what it means for him to self-identify as a democratic socialist and be a part of that tradition. And to me, that's incredibly valuable. And I'm looking at his actual campaign, and I'm not seeing him really out there. I'm not seeing him really doing what I would guess that a Cornel West campaign would be able to do for the left. Like even from his launching a pretty disastrously, then switching parties really quickly. It really has seemed far more clumsy than I would have guessed from a Cornel West run.
So I agree with much of that, but I guess I'm just not seeing what that has to do with him running as a Democrat.
I think he will be taken less seriously as a Green Party candidate because the Green Party is not, at the moment, a party that has been able to successfully advocate for working class interests in any form and any point in history in the United States. I think in most parts of the world. Um,
Well,
it's a party whose
how on earth
message
are you
of
going to
being
change that? How on earth are you going to change that if he wants to put all of the goodwill that he has earned over a lifetime and a career and tie himself to the Democratic Party, which is not also, I mean, you can argue about some point in history, but today, in many people's eyes, is not advocating for the interests of working people in the least, or is doing the absolute bare minimum it needs to do to be able to hold itself out as better than the alternative, the Republican Party.
Yeah, I think the Democratic Party has basically been useless since 1972 or so. I don't know what year you want to put it in. And even then, when it was somewhat useful and doing useful things in the 60s, it was also killing, hundreds of thousands of people in Southeast Asia. So
Right. So
I, yeah,
don't you want to build a new party? You want the Green Party to be better. But if nobody with legitimacy is ever a part of the Green Party or willing to support any other new party like MPP, in all fairness, MPP is got its problems. Nick Briahna has his problems for sure. But I think the instinct to want to lend your name to help grow independent party efforts is the right one. Okay, so it's not MPP because it's toxic, but then here's the Green Party. And you can sit here and say, well, the Green Party isn't good enough. Okay, well, then found something else. Or let's invest in what we have. That's not the Democratic Party. And I think this is part of the issue people have with the DSA as well. It comes off as a bit of fence sitting to say, well, we'll support these candidates that run within the Democratic Party who say they're democratic socialists. We're not really going to hold them accountable in any meaningful way to the extent that they've strayed from their initial commitments and are completely unwilling to talk to independent media, completely unwilling to really be accountable to the organization in any way. We are not, however, going to support third parties. We're not going to start to form our own party. We're not going to become a political organization ourselves. We're going to basically just not endorse and say nothing about someone like Joe Biden because, well, the alternative is even worse. Like that kind of, I think, approach is demoralizing to people, and why there's a lack of confidence in that organization in particular right now, because people thought and wanted it, frankly, to be more radical than it's choosing to be. I mean, what do you say to that critique?
well, I think DSA on some issues is, like you say, not radical enough. I think the perspective of not really having a set of here's the 10 things that make you a DSA member.
Yeah.
And if you don't follow these 10 things, sorry, you can't be a DSA member or you shouldn't join. Here's a point of principle. If you want to be a DSA associate and elected, we're going to campaign for you. We're going to give you XYZ, but you have to. And you could vote like a free individual on 80% of things, but on 20% of core issues, these 5 issues, you have to vote in a block together. And to me, that's the very basics of being a membership organization. I think DSA sometimes falls short of that. I still think people should join DSA and change DSA from within, because it still does a tremendous amount of good work and radical organizing among tenants, for climate justice, for a host of issues that people should care about. Labor solidarity. I don't have to go on.
Sure. Is that not true of the Green Party too? Should people not join the Green Party and try to make those?
I don't think people should join the Green Party. I don't think the Green Party has a perspective and vision of socialist transformation. I don't think it recognizes the particular role of the working class. I think even the name Green itself implies a lack of respect for the preeminence of the working class at the point of production and the need for growth and prosperity rooted in the working class, particularly industrial workers.
So change the name, but come on, like the critique of
the Green Party changes
the Green Party is that it's got a bad name.
Yeah.
And that it's like run by people who you don't want it to run it, and it's got a direction that you don't like. Well, hell's bells. Here's Cornel West, who you say you like so much, willing to go and say, I'm going to be the new face of the Green Party. Is that not an opportunity for exactly the kind of changes that you're advocating at the DSA that also has these leadership issues, these direction issues? Yeah.
I think the DSA needs a perspective and a strategy towards an actual break with the Democratic Party in such a way that forms an independent party that's viable and strong and far stronger than the Green Party. I think, in other words, it's more viable. I think that's more viable than imagining a future where the Green Party is a strong opposition that, let's say, 1 in 5 working class Americans support. So the question is, what route? So in other words, if the Cornell West route, to me, in the Green Party, is a less viable route to that left working class
Less
opposition.
viable than what? It's not happening. You can
But
say it's less
neither, I mean,
viable,
but at the
but the
moment, neither is
DSA
the Green.
today is today. Today is today, and there is an election that's happening in 2024. Point blank, period. So whatever fantasy world where the DSA gets its act together and decides to finally get into politics and wants to break away and have a new party, hey, I'm all for that. But say what you want about Nick Briahna, and I have a lot of things to say. But he put his money where his mouth is and tried to build something, and it failed. And he has his personal peccadillos that have gotten his own way. I don't mean to minimize it by calling them peccadillos, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But that was an effort. DSA has an enormous footprint. It has membership numbers. It has prominence. It had the ability to do exactly that, but they didn't choose to do that. And so now we're sitting here today where, for all the complaints about the Green Party, it's there. And the DSA in this fantasy world, and we're going to organize, and it's going to happen in the future. Great. I support all of that. Call me when it happens.
But DSA does have 300 elected officials, out of which maybe 150 are very good and very oppositional.
I love that.
So that's a bigger footprint than
that's
the Green Party.
My point, Bhaskar. That's what's so disappointing. It's why not, like, to sit here and criticize when the DSA has made a choice. There's, like, if I understand it correctly, they've made a political choice not to become a political party or get into the politics game, right? Like, they've stated that that's not what they want to do. And maybe that'll change in the future. I frankly think that it should change in the future. I frankly think that we desperately need a party that is not the Democratic Party for people to funnel their political energy into. And that can really represent the interest of the Bernie movement when someone like Bernie, God bless him, is unwilling to continue to draw those contrasts after his personal campaign is over and to be the movement leader that we really wanted him to be. Okay? But that has not happened today. Today, Cornell West options were join MPP or join the Green Party. And that's why we saw this weird floundering thing that happened. But like that's what it is. So I think that the frustration that I have, and I think what a lot of other people have, is that in moments like this, in anticipation of an election that we have known was going to be in 2024 since the country was founded in 1776, we know when these elections are coming, unless there's some constitutional change. We know what the dates are going to be. The work has not been done to do anything other than the options that we have today, which is that Cornel West, if he doesn't want to run as a Democrat, has to run as a Green. And that's why I'm frustrated by this criticism. If you want the Green Party to change, invest in it, change it. Why is organizing only about doing something else somewhere else and not about doing the organizing work to make the Green Party, which does do work, does have infrastructure, does have ballot access, has gotten farther than any other third party effort, absent the Libertarian Party, any other left third party effort. They're the farthest along. So why not try to improve it if you have these legitimate criticisms of it?
Yeah, I'm not interested in improving the Green Party for all the reasons I stated, green? But I don't think it has a perspective that I would say is socialist enough or could lead us towards and also I don't think it has a viable strategy for building mass support. But I will 100% concede that there should have been a clear DSA strategy in regards to 2024. If coming out of 2016 and 2020, it was clear that DSA as an organization and socialism more broadly in America made, despite all its flaws that we talked about, made a huge leap forward with Bernie Sanders being up there, talking about his obviously softer version of democratic socialism, but just talking about some of the core issues. Someone should have went up to Cornell West, for example, before MPP or the others got to him and said, we want you to run as an open democratic socialist. We think you should do it in the Democratic primary. If you do, you're going to have, we're going to vote for that endorsement. We're going to put it out at a national convention in 2022, a draft Cornell West or draft anyone proposition for a run. It could even be left open-ended, depending on how the primary went, whether with that force and energy, you know, whether that precluded an independent run. I think due to ballot access, it probably would have. But if it was part of a coherent strategy, it would have made a lot of sense. And instead, I think DSA has avoided um, a lot of these difficult decisions, and in part because it is too incoherent as an organization right now. It's a very broad tent of basically the entire left. It ranges from you know, anarchists and left communists who ideologically don't support any sort of runs in bourgeois, you know, elections, to people on the right of DSA who I honestly cannot identify the difference between them and kind of Brandeisian kind of liberalism or other sort of like mainstream progressives to, you know, obviously the broader 90% of the organization that I have a lot of ideological affinity to. But since they're so diverse, the organization has decided, rightly or wrongly, I think wrongly, to just be a very, very broad tent in which very little can be done at the national level because of fear of provoking a split, because of fear of the dangers that would happen through having a clearer program and a more powerful membership organization that can do things like make decisions like, hey, we need to pick a candidate for 2024. So I think all those criticisms are valid. And I think a lot of this conversation, a lot of our difference relate to the fact that I think we're both frustrated in different ways at where the left is and where this democratic socialist, quote unquote, moment has gone. And we both see dead ends in the dominant approaches of the left, in your case with running through democratic primaries the way we've been running, or in this case without a candidate, and in my view with a certain type of third partyism that I think has been a dead end without having kind of a mass base.
I hear people say, okay, the one thing I would say to that is the same way the DSA is reluctant to have a split and therefore is going to rather languish in impotency. That is also what's happening with people who are unwilling to fracture the Democratic Party by saying we're going to have a third party. And sometimes that means that you get smaller before you get bigger. And I think history shows that the people who are willing to be out there adversarial, antagonistic, and speak their truth, like Bernie did in 2016, or that frankly RFK Jr. is doing, they attract an audience because there is something that people trust when you're willing to do something that seems self-damaging. It gives you credibility. It's to say, you must really believe this for you to do something that is going to be so obviously unpopular, like be a vaccine skeptic or whatever, right? And that's I think a lesson that it needs to be learned.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.